welcome to YHP and Shine Media Presents. I'm Joanna Abayi, and today I'm talking to Andy Bell, who is the co-founder of Mint Digital. Welcome, Andy.
Hello.
Hello, thanks for having us.
It's a great pleasure, thank you for coming.
Now, we've got lots of quirky products here on the table, but first of all, in your own words, explain what Mint Digital is.
So Mint Digital is a digital innovation agency, so there's 35 people, we're based in London and New York, but our ambition is to kind of help companies and help ourselves innovate digitally. So we're 50-50 split, 50% of our innovation is for companies, so we're kind of working with the likes of Tesco's, with the kind of big bank at the moment, to kind of help them make use of digital technology. But the bit I'm kind of mostly responsible for is our self-funded innovation, so we have some of our new products around here now. Okay,
so talk us through, because we've got little men.
Yeah.
What are these exactly?
So these are called Foldable Me. The idea of this product is it's a bit like a Nintendo Me on the website. So you go online, you choose from hundreds of beards, hundreds of hairdos, hundreds of eyes to create a version of yourself, which then gets sent to you as a pre-cut and pre-scored, very high quality foldable figure, which you can then produce.
Now, what would make you think of creating something like this? Because it's very clever and it took off.
So, in fact, the reason we came up with that one, it was kind of directly after we'd come up with this one.
Okay.
So this was a product we did called Stickygram, which is putting Instagrams on fridge magnets, and this took off like way beyond our kind of expectations. And so we said to ourselves, let's try and see if was this just a fluke, or can we kind of recreate it? The two things we thought were interesting about this was, one, it allowed people to scratch a creative itch, and secondly, it was a digital product that existed in the physical world. So we went away for a week as a company, and we divided into 3 teams, and we set ourselves that as a brief, come up with something that allows users to scratch a creative itch to create something that exists in the physical world. And that was a product that came out of that. So at the end of that week, we put it on Kickstarter, raised £25,000, and that was sufficient for us to kind of finish off the production of it and do all the tooling in every occasion.
Okay, so how did you know this was going to work then? Because you did the brief and you all worked out this concept and these were born. How did you know it was going to?
I mean, I think we weren't really sure, but putting it on Kickstarter was a tremendous validation for us, because you kind of think, well, here's like 300 or 400 people have actually decided, haven't just said they like it, but like it enough to put some money forward. So that's been interesting. But then I think with some of the things we've done more recently, we're kind of like, in fact, it's really hard to. There's some things that work on Kickstarter, but some of our more recent products, we kind of like, for various reasons, we don't feel that method of testing is likely to work. So we've slightly moved towards just kind of trusting our instincts and going for it, perhaps.
Okay, so we've got the magnet, and then we moved on a step, didn't we?
So
to project it.
So this again was one guy at Mint tinkering around at home, and so one day he came in with this idea of a miniature Instagram projector. So this is what we have here is you've got a high-powered LED light, the sort that you get in bike lights nowadays. So you can get these really small batteries that are really powerful, and then you have 9 of your Instagrams projected onto one slide of 35mm film. So that's actually
you can see them in there.
Yeah, exactly. It's nothing digital about that at all.
Yeah.
Again, we put this on Kickstarter. This one raised $87,000, so it's kind of 3 times more successful than that. And that was enough. I mean, this was a lot harder to produce because we're manufacturing it in China, coupled with then there's a photo lab in the States which then fulfills it and prints off the slide wheels. So it's there's a whole batch of complexity to this.
I can imagine.
And then I think this is a sample for we've just started to sell these in. This is going to be sold in a museum. So it's in a museum shop. So it seems to work in that kind of environment.
We can't avoid bumps, so let's not put it back down. But this is marshmallows, believe it or not.
So this is something.
How did this happen?
About September last year, I was approached by someone who had been chatting to James Middleton at Wimbledon. And James Middleton had a cake business, so he'd been working on customised cakes. But his big frustration with customised cakes was because they're so big, they have to be sent in a parcel. And so for maybe a £12 cake, you end up spending 10 quid for postage. So a 12 quid cake ends up costing 22 quid. And one thing he'd noticed that we'd done with Stickygram is we'd created something that worked as a letter size rather than parcel size. So anyway, he was keen to get chatting to us, and he'd had this idea of he thought marshmallows were the perfect thing because they're kind of thin enough and small enough to be letter size. But he's really a cake producer, so he didn't really know about the website of it. So anyway, we partnered up with him in September, and we launched this just in time for Christmas, and it's just it's taken off beyond our wildest dreams.
And so, did you test them, let's say, on anyone? Or you just kind of had...
So we did some testing. So we put up a website and we sent them to maybe sort of 10 friends, we did one round with friends and then one round of kind of slightly more distant acquaintances. And people liked them, but they weren't ecstatic about them. But then when we launched, we just got probably one of the strongest reactions to anything we've launched. And I remember a guy from Apple came around to see us on the day 2 after we'd launched, because he wanted them for some event for some product he was launching. So he'd come around from the Apple offices in Regent Street. He said something like, "It's what Steve would have loved," talking about Steve Jobs. "It's what Steve would have loved. It's a perfect mix of art and technology." I was really taken aback by that.
That needs to go on the website.
I wish I'd videoed that moment, because I think until that moment we'd always kind of thought of it as kind of, I don't know, we'd sort of seen it as something a kind of Stickygram style of thing, but then I think the reaction to it has been, I think the further we take it, the more we understand it's more about this kind of gastro magic of multi-sensory cuisine, and it's kind of bringing computers to cooking is just something that hasn't really been done in this way at all.
And it says here, obviously, enjoy your magical moments. So on the marshmallows, these are images of memories, essentially.
Yeah, and the typical things people are printing are their husbands, wives, boyfriends, girlfriends, dogs, children, and
marshmallows.
For me, and that's a really exciting thing about bumpers. You see some sort of general ones, and you think, oh, they look quite nice. But when, if I give you a code and you make some of your friends and people, the moment when you have one of your friends and you're like, there's a kind of
eat your face.
Yeah, exactly. It's so weird and it's so hilarious. It's just like a kind of really strange and brilliant moment.
No, this is fantastic. It's one of my favourites. So you can see that one there. Now you've got some new products that you're going to show us.
Yeah. So 2 things that we're working on at the moment. Desk Beers is, so this is premium craft beer delivered to your workplace on a Friday afternoon. So we launched this maybe 3 months ago, and this is the other business that's really booming for us at the moment. And then a final thing is just about to launch at the end of this week. It's called the Bathery. So the Bathery is it's a chance to create your own perfect bath. You can go onto the website and you can choose from a number of different bases and a number of different emotions that you want. So we'll mix the essential oils for you and create possibly the best bath of your life
you've ever had. Okay, well, you obviously, just through the descriptions of your products, you can already see you're very unique in what you're doing. How do you create a company like this, and where on earth would you find a team this creative?
Initially, I worked for a television company, which kind of worked strangely on a bit of a army basis, where there was a kind of general who was creative, and then a whole batch of people in a kind of pyramid under him carrying out his demands. And one of my co-founders and the CEO here, a guy called Cameron, who comes from the software industry, I think specifically Microsoft, where I think they really work on a basis where it's got to be the engineers who are at the front line who are making the decisions, because the decisions are so detailed and so complicated. So I think we've tried to implement that kind of company structure here. So it's kind of, and I think each one of these things comes from a different person.
Okay.
And I think we've been very lucky with the caliber of people we've hired. But I think above that, I think it's giving people the room and the chance and the belief to come up with things.
So if there's a young person out there at the moment with a startup and a company and they have an idea, how would they get you to notice it? And to maybe take it on? What should they do?
I think my email address is on the website saying if you've got ideas. I guess one thing we've struggled with on a kind of practical basis is we find ideas are relatively easy to come by. It's the execution that's really hard, and we have more ideas than we know what to do of ourselves. When we were approached by James for the marshmallows, I mean, I think what was extraordinary was here's a man who'd built a prototype and who had a production facility to make it. Now I know that's pretty rare that you can come up with that. But I suppose kind of in general, when we're looking for partnerships, we're kind of keen on people who have something beyond an idea. So whether it's a kind of a route to market, a particular knowledge of a domain of business experience. That said, I mean, we're always recruiting, or we're often recruiting. So, and like another thing that's kind of that we work quite hard at is we encourage people to move around internally. So, like a lot of the people here are doing jobs that they were never hired for.
Oh.
So if you get in and you kind of show enthusiasm, you can kind of end up doing anything. Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell us how it all started? Because I know your entrepreneurial journey's been 8 years, but I didn't realise digital itself has been 8 years. So.
I was looking for a job in 2004, and it was an absolutely terrible time to look for web jobs because it was kind of after the dot-com boom. And I'd spent about 3 months looking, and I thought I was about to get a job that was terrible in every regard. It was for a bad company selling a really nasty product in a way that I didn't think would work. Okay. And anyway, I just thought if this is the best I can do, maybe starting a company would
be a good option.
Yeah, but anyway, so I kind of thought, well, but I have to take this job because I've been looking for so long. So I went home, wrote a whole batch of emails to anyone I could think of, and luckily one person needed a website being made, and I can't really make websites. I'm kind of a producer, so I was able to persuade the guy I used to work with to come and join me, who's still with us today. Oh. So anyway, so that was the two of us. We started out as
Did he just quit his job just like that?
So yeah, I kind of managed to persuade him to quit his job. we had 1 month's worth of work ahead of us to do, but I was like, I'm sure I can find some more. If you do the work, I'll find more work. And so we managed to just kind of turn that like initial £4,000 project into. We've kind of managed to just keep going, and hopefully by doing good work we've been able to kind of step up a gear, take on bigger projects, and then fund our own inventions now like we do now. And
you mentioned your funding. You said Kickstart. Okay, so explain that, because some people may not know how that works, but it's been very good for you.
So the way Kickstarter works is it's a crowdfunding platform. So you put an idea on there, typically explained through a video, and you say, here's how much money we want in order to make it, and normally you'll kind of have various levels of pledges. So for instance, I think with this one, if someone pledged $35, they'd get one of the first ones off the production line. Really? If they pledged $5, they'd get a postcard that said thank you very much for supporting us. Okay. And if they pledged $500, I think we promised to spray one gold. And, anyway, so that's kind of the way it works. But then the real challenge is thousands of people are putting things onto Kickstarter every day, so you need to get noticed. And also the trick we found is that a lot of the money that you raise on Kickstarter comes from within Kickstarter. So it's the people who bought this also like this type of link. But the only way you get up the rankings for them to give you that kind of prominence is by giving it a big push on day one, so that it kind of gets a bit of momentum, and then the momentum continues. So that's our kind of Kickstarter approach, is to try and create a lovely video so that people believe it exists, and then email absolutely everyone we know on the first day to try and get a bit of momentum going, and then hopefully it builds from there. Okay,
now because we've got here and you've got all these brilliant products, and you've been going for 8 years, but there must have been some challenges. What were those?
There have been a lot of challenges along the way. I suppose we almost ran out of money once, and we had 3 months where everyone was very gratefully all took I was very grateful to them. They all they deferred their pay, or deferred part of their pay. I think that was one of the biggest challenges. Another challenge was as an agency, we did a project for the BBC about 6 years ago that didn't quite work out, and in fact the Times picked up on it and described it as a great idea ruined by incompetent execution. Oh, no. And it was their idea and our execution, so that was nice. That was a pretty low moment for us. I think we've been tremendously lucky in that the kind of, as we grew, two other good friends joined us. So we had an initial group of 4 people who were friends. And you often hear advice that don't go into business with friends, but my experience has been, it's been a wonderful thing to do, because you're spending time with your friends, you're growing your friendship by coming across all these different experiences. And so, it's kind of far more interesting than just meeting up in the pub once in a while, is to kind of try and solve a business problem together. And then that kind of culture of friendship, I think, has kind of grown as we've grown as a company.
Okay, so what about the myths? Because there are a lot of myths around business. So is there things you've learnt now that you wish you sort of knew maybe 8 years ago that would have changed the way things worked out for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not quite sure it's a myth, or maybe it's a misconception. Is before I started, I was, I really wanted to start a business for a long time before I started a business, but I was always kind of worried that I wasn't the business type. I didn't think I was kind of, enough of a natural born leader, or, I'm not particularly confident picking up the phone, and, particularly 8 years ago, that sort of felt like the way you had to be to sell.
Yeah.
And the thing that really amazed me in like my first year in business, and kind of particularly going around small business networking events, was I kind of thought the average calibre of entrepreneurs in the UK is worse than the average calibre of my friends who I've seen going off and becoming accountants or lawyers, or really doing quite run-of-the-mill things. And so for me, it really inspired me to just be like, I kind of think if more of my friends had tried to start businesses, I think there's a good chance they'd have succeeded. But there's the myth, I guess, is you kind of have to be Superman. But I think the reality, at least as I've seen it, is you really just have to keep plugging away, because I don't think, it's very rare that a business kind of coalesces on day one, but if you, into something valuable, but if you can kind of just keep in business, keep kind of the good people you meet along the way, if you can kind of encourage them to stay around, you can kind of hopefully get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, then kind of value accumulates, just because every year you can do things that you couldn't do initially. So it's a kind of, I guess in a nutshell, it would be, you don't have to be Superman, and you just have to stay alive. That's the kind of
just don't die.
that is the kind of number one thing is But I mean, that sounds simple, but I think it's so easy as a small businessman to kind of have your head turned by a big kind of, we must invest X over, let's invest 100 grand over here when you've only got 20 grand on your balance sheet, and in which people put themselves in very perilous situations because they have their head turned by incredible opportunities, and often 9 times out of 10 the incredible opportunity doesn't quite come through.
As an incredible opportunity.
It's not quite as good as you anticipate. It doesn't repay as quickly as possible, and if that sinks you, then you're sunk. Whereas if so I think that's I suppose there's the kind of myth is that an entrepreneur is a risk taker, because I think an entrepreneur is really quite conservative. You're trying to keep growing. You're trying to look for the opportunities, but in a way that kind of ensures you don't die.
There was a time when you lost some money. And you've also admitted that banks said no quite a lot. Which I'm sure other companies and startups are probably facing that at times. What would you say to those people that are probably thinking, I can't get my idea off the ground, there's no cash flow coming in at the moment. Banks are saying no to me.
My personal experience is that banks have been absolutely terrible, and you're wasting your time even trying to talk to them for a loan. I think where we've had a lot more luck has been, and this isn't a route that's available to everyone, is sort of friends and friends of friends. So the initial investor in Mint was, in fact, my old boss. So after we've been going 18 months, I went to see my old boss, and I kind of explained how we were building websites, and if we build £4,000 a month, we could pay ourselves, and also, because there were 2 of us, and also pay off a small debt we'd incurred on a Mac laptop. And he laughed at me and said, "This is the most crazily undercapitalised business I've ever encountered in my life." And he gave us a loan and just said, he gave us, he took a share in the company, and he kind of said, "I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I'm sure there's something just with enough money to not be looking at to be looking 6 months ahead rather than 2 weeks ahead. Something good will happen." And that was really the making of us. And he's been wonderful to us. He's given us we've had a board meeting with him as chairman every month since 8 years ago, and the amount of advice and experience we've had from that. So I think probably the best single thing that can happen to any entrepreneur trying to get started is finding someone who believes in you, who's prepared to invest some money and some time, because there's just, when you're starting a business, there's so many things to get right, you can't keep your eye on all of them, and having someone who's a bit wiser and a bit older can kind of alert you to some of the rocks that are coming up.
Okay, now before we move on, you say that you like to give back because it matters. So what sorts of things are happening here at Mint Digital that's giving back to the community?
So we do a whole bunch of things. On our website there's a kind of a community section, so we run a series of events basically trying to encourage people into the industry or trying to kind of share our knowledge. The kind of two of the main things we do, one is called Ladies Who Code, so that's a monthly meetup for trying to encourage more ladies into the software industry, and sort of by kind of creating a kind of non-threatening environment for people to discuss and enjoy, and you know, just kind of share the love of code. 'Cause there's a kind of this kind of programmer attitude that can be a bit macho and intimidating initially, and then another kind of knowledge sharing thing we do is called Bacon, which is a kind of developer conference all about things that developers love.
I have some tasks for you.
Oh my gosh.
My first task is to do with a pack of M&Ms. So we'll put some of these away.
Yeah.
We know they're your inspiration, but we want you to try and do this right off the cuff. So, can you come up with a way with this bag of M&Ms that will change enhance a person's experience when eating them?
So the thing I'm thinking about, and this isn't really a very good answer, is something my brother always used to say to me when we were children was like, if I was about to eat an apple or a banana or something, he'd say, imagine this apple costs 100 quid and it is like the most delicious thing you've ever eaten. But if you just like, if you thought this was my last apple I was ever going to eat, or if you thought this apple had been served for me by Gordon Ramsay on a plate, you'd be like, wow, what incredible flavours. And you know, and it's such a shame that you take it for granted. Anyway, and you know, and I think similarly an M&M is like, if you can change the context of it. So the person I think is really fascinating about changing the context of food is Heston Blumenthal. So he'll serve a seafood souffle, and you have to listen to some sounds of the sea in a shell. You know, like, I'm not sure if the souffle is any better than the rival chefs, but the whole experience, the whole like getting people, changing the context, getting people to spend a moment thinking about it. What I'd like is if you rip this open, if it like played really loudly, it said, "Stop! This is the last M&M you're going to ever eat, and it is delicious." But it was like absolutely, almost like a deafening. You know, it was kind of like God was speaking to you. I think that'd be my approach. And really, one of my colleagues, I don't know if he's here, has a lovely prototype for a flick book, because I think they're short enough that you can flick your way. You can turn this like every page into a page and then flick through it like that.
Okay. So it'd be almost like a little video photo type album.
A little video photo type album. And we've never got around to making that. I'd love to do something with marshmallows though. So you kind of, maybe you've got 9 frames of a marshmallow. I mean, the dream would be, I have no idea how you'd achieve this, to have the video, if we can have moving ink on the marshmallow, so you looked at your vine playing on a marshmallow and then you ate it.
Insane if you could create that. I think you're the guy for the job though.
I think within 20 years it's got to be possible. We're just one technology breakthrough away from it happening.
Yeah, we are. Very lastly, what digital offering would you suggest to creating to increase a child's interest in reading a physical book that isn't already on the market?
Until you got to the last bit, I was thinking of there's some people around the corner from us who've got a lovely kind of digital physical crossover project that I'm really inspired by called Lost My Name. So it's a book where the pages of the book are composed of the children's name as they look for it. So that would be, anyway, but that is on the market.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're talking us before we go though. What's next? What else have you got up your sleeve that you can tell us?
We've got one really exciting product that I'm excited about. I'm not sure I can tell you what it is, apart from to say it's kind of, if you imagine something that's kind of halfway between, it's a kind of cosmetics type of thing, and it's got an element of bump on it, then and it's probably might be available in about 3 months' time. That's all I can say.
So it's soon to be around.
Soon to be unveiled.
Thank you very much, Andy, for spending all this time with us. Now, if you'd like some more information on Mint Digital, or indeed Andy Bell, you can find out by checking this link that's just below the screen.